It begins with iron and salt. A December wind claws across the ramparts of Tomar, stirring the scent of damp stone and cold ash. Beneath the cloister's arches, candlelight shivers across rose-red flags, stitched with the Red Cross, holy in appearance, hollow in truth. The silence trembles like breath held too long. In a hidden crypt beneath the chapel floor, the air grows heavier, not with dust, but with dread. The walls, carved of Templar grit, are mottled with centuries of unknown watermarks, like tears frozen in stone. A single lamp, suspended on a chain of tarnished bronze, casts a pale circle across a marble slab. Across that slab, keys and daggers lie like offerings. At the center, a child is laid, a child of 8 summers, clad in white wool, his eyes wide with unknowing. He is heir to blood and oath, his lineage bound to the Red Cross, bound to the Order's last breath. This is no consecration, it is a covenant, one last terrible covenant. A circle of knights stands stooped over him, their armor stripped of polish, their crosses dulled by the salt of undone prayers. Their voices, when they speak, form a hush of ancient Latin, but it is not the Latin of Mass. This is a tongue of travelers, of exiled monks, of men who have held gauntlets over the Black Sea and seen death dissolve in dawn. Oro pro eis, they chant. I pray for them, but their prayer is for another world. They dip their hands in wine dark as iron, then trace the boy's palms, his chest, the hollow of his throat. A cross anointed with ritual oil, infused with ash from Acre. Ground bone, crushed rosary beads, the charred remnant of sacrifices made by moonlight. They stir the wine with a dagger, and the blade hums, a low vibration as if alive. The Templars knew the power of blood-soaked iron. They had seen the red sands of Antioch and whispered that steel carried the mark of God's sorrow. Tonight, in this hidden crypt, they channel grief into blood. One knight leans forward. He presses the blade just enough to break skin. 2 drops blossom on the boy's white tunic, a red flower in a field of snow. The knights step back as the child sobs, not of pain, but of knowing. The room tilts. He is suspended between worlds, innocence and inheritance, life and curse. They inscribe a cipher on the marble with wine and bone dust, a sigil known only to the Grand Masters, an invocation of devotion, secrecy, and exile. The letters bleed together, the circle hums in unison. Per filios mortem venient, through children death arrives. A bell tolls above, in the chapel, silent to outside ears, but in the crypt, it cracks the air. A threshold has been crossed.
The ritual completes. The knights extinguish the lamp. The boy is carried upward, wrapped in white wool again.
He is told simply, remember nothing. But memory is a living thing, and in the cold corridor he trembles, not with fear, but with promise. Above, the winter wind howls across the ramparts. They left Tomar at dawn. The child was their burden and their hope, a living ledger of something that would be revealed only in time. They traveled east, through Portugal's olive groves, across Iberia's ghost towns, carrying secrets that would silence kingdoms. The child grew, silent, pale, distant. His name was lost. The knights called him Frater Obscurus, brother of darkness. He knew no sun, except through cellars and cloisters. His play was a game of memorizing chant, his dreams bound in runes and crosses, his meals sparse, bread, goat's cheese, bitter herbs drawn from Templar gardens. Yet he was not broken, his spirit tempered like steel in flame. And in the nights, when stars dreamed against his window, he wrote. He wrote in ash on stone, in chalk on slate, in blood on linen. He chronicled nothing, only echoes, a heartbeat without a body, a life without a name. In 1314, when the Tower of London fell silent after the bonfire of the Templars, the last Grand Master lay dead. The order was dissolved, its property seized, its knights scattered. Yet Frater Obscurus endured. The curse lived within him, a bridge between a past buried and a future forbidden. He traveled north, into Scotland, into the borders where war was eternal and kings wore shadows like cloaks. There he met Isabella, a maiden of wild eyes and sharper mind. She spoke no Latin, but her tongues were many, Gaelic, Norse, Phoenician symbols memorized in scribes' ruins. She found him scratching symbols in the mud between locks, tracing the Templar cipher that still consumed him. She saw the ash on his fingertips, the blood beneath his nails. She did not fear. She knelt beside him and said, "Tell me." And against centuries of silence, he whispered the ritual's echo. She listened, and she learned. They traveled together across war-torn hills, gathering fragments, stone seals stolen from Cistercian abbeys, wooden crosses harvested from burned churches, chants half remembered by shepherds. Isabella believed that the curse could be unmade, that the ritual had been intended to protect, not annihilate, that the final heirs were meant to bury a truth too dangerous to live unguarded. But the knights who carried the ritual's origin did not intend release. They intended closure, death. By the time they reached the Orkney Isles, they were pursued, not by men, but by belief. Shadows elongated into pursuit. A chorus of cloaked figures appeared beneath moonlit stones. The knights who once honored obedience now sought obedience from death. On a storm-lashed shore, Isabella confronted them. Waves crashed like iron bellows. She held a parchment, Frater's confession, written in ash and sweat, binding him to her through vow. The knights circled, their voices rose. Per filios mortem venient, they intoned again. Isabella spoke the same phrase backward in Phoenician. The words cracked the air. The ritual unraveled, the spell turned inward. The knights staggered as grief collapsed into them. Then, one by one, they fell silent, bodies spent of purpose. The child, now a man of wild hair and silent eyes, stood in the eye of ritual storm. He and Isabella knelt, gathering the fallen into the sand. They whispered promises into the void, promises of memory, not oblivion, of lineage, not desolation. The sky opened, rain fell, not to wash away, but to baptize. Years passed. In Edinburgh's silent vaults, Isabella built a cabin where the ritual's ashes and parchments lay sealed. The man once cursed became a keeper, not of silence, but of testimony. They named their daughter Nessa, weaving new life from old ashes. Nessa tasted history in her cradle. She learned the whispered Latin of exile, the cipher of Templar grief. She walked corridors lined with stone tablets and iron rings. She inherited not a curse, but a legacy, a burden made light by memory. On her 14th winter, a letter arrived, sealed with a cross of black wax. No sender, no name, only one word, Requiem. She recognized the cipher immediately, a call, or a warning. That night, she descended into the vault beneath her cabin. The documents lay within a wooden chest carved with Templar crosses and spiral glyphs. She opened them. Among faded ink and brittle vellum lay the original parole from Tomar, the oath that bound the children of the ritual to curse, not to death, but to silence. Silentium aeternum. She read it aloud. The words hummed in the electric hush. The vault lights flickered. A presence pressed near. Nessa did not flinch. She lifted her voice, Latin, Gaelic, Phoenician. She recited the ritual backward. She offered not blood, but an unbreaking vow, to remember, to speak, to teach. The walls sighed, the air stilled. Somewhere above, a bell tolled, not of mourning, but awakening. The next morning, the cabin stood empty. Nessa had taken the parchments and the ashes. She carried them north, toward the fjords where winter lasts forever. There, under auroras that shook like prayers, she would rewrite the ritual's final chapter, not to curse her heirs, but to free them. She wrote in fire on stone, in memory and flame, binding the forgotten to the living. And somewhere in Europe, a grand lodge burned, not by fire alone, but by revelation. Documents surfaced, symbols unveiled, statues toppled. The world shook, not with anger, but with recognition. It had been living atop a hidden grave. In Edinburgh, beneath a window dusted with snow, a man looked up at the stars. His daughter stood beside him, her breath a whisper in night air. He smiled, the ritual finally complete, not with silence, but with voice.